No? Maybe we start over. It's
I'm fine doing that. Welcome, everybody. It is 5:34 after a couple minutes of troubleshooting. I'd like to call to order our special January 6th, 2025 Historic Landmarks meeting. We have a couple of important items on our special agenda tonight. The first is our election of officers for the chair and vice chair. And then if we have any public comment, and then we are going to postpone our approval of minutes more than likely until our regular February meeting, and then we will get into our action items. So first item is the election of officers. We have our two positions to discuss, which is the chair and vice chair. So we have in attendance right now, it's myself, Rachel Stemich, our ex officio member, Christine Horton-Jones, and online is Dennis Schmidling and Eli Ashley. So I am assuming if we wanted to, we can still nominate those who aren't even present, so if we want to. So I open up for anyone to offer nominations for the chair or vice chair, or both.
Without others present, is it possible to even vote?
That's what I'm not sure of.
Yeah, it's technically between Commissioner Schmidling, Ashley, and Stemich, the non-ex officio, it is a quorum because it's five regular, sorry, non-ex officio members, so it is a quorum. It is up to the chair's discretion, because that is a good point, how you'd like to do that. I suppose you could postpone it until there's a full attendance if you wanted to. I mean, up to you. Oh, and I see, Lily Cyphers is here now.
Oh, Lily.
She's also ex officio, so
That's
we're
correct.
happy to have her, but it doesn't help with the voting.
You just left.
Oh, there she is.
Hey,
Hi.
Lily. Excellent. I'm kind of indifferent whether or not we want to postpone until we have more, more members or not. It's when does our next term start, technically?
Technically, it's the calendar year.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe we should just do it and be done with it for 2025. So.
Well, I'll make a motion to for Rachel Stemich to serve as chair for one more year, or whatever the term is. I guess it's one more year, and for Dennis Schmidling to be vice chair for one more year as well. So I'll place that in motion, or make a motion. The reason I'm jumping the gun here is because the two of you have such good experience, and both me, I can see Mark Hudson, Laura, I don't know to what extent her background is, but I think for us new commissioner members, the seasoned approach with people like Rachel and Dennis is really helpful. And as long as you two have the time and the patience to lead for this year and maybe more, I'd be very comfortable with that.
Yeah.
How you feel about it, Rachel?
Yeah, Dennis, how do you feel about continuing on as vice chair for 2025?
I'd do that if you're the chair.
Only? Is that a deal?
Yeah.
Eli, I understand the probably a comfort level. I mean, being that our commission doesn't meet like on a really frequent basis, it does take a little bit of kind of learning the ropes I feel, to be comfortable as a commissioner. Yeah, and I'd love to offer my expertise or experience or whatever you want to call it for another year. I think I wouldn't say I have the time for it, but I have the patience, so
You
be all right with
certainly
that.
have the skill.
Thank you.
So do we have a second? I guess I'll second.
Okay.
I don't know if I can, I don't know
Thanks,
if I can
Dennis.
seconding if I'm a nominee.
Yeah, that,
Lily, can you second?
I
no,
don't
she's
think
ex
I'm allowed
officio.
to. Yeah.
I think only the chair must restrain from seconding, but I'm not so sure about the vice chair.
Okay.
Yeah.
If that's true, then I will second.
All right, then I think that sounds like we have our decision and our quorum. So yeah, let's proceed with 2025. Chair is myself, Rachel Stemich, continuing in the same role, and Dennis Schmidling as our vice chair for the year. So thank you for the nomination.
Congratulations,
Welcome.
Rachel.
Yes, congratulations to everybody.
Yeah.
All
Any
right.
speeches?
Yeah. Oh, no speech.
Okay.
Our next item on the agenda is public comment. I'm not sure if we have any for this special meeting, but we always ask. Okay. All right. So our next item, as mentioned, was the approval of the minutes for November 18th. I'm suggesting that we postpone those until our regular meeting for
Mhm.
next month in February to review.
Okay.
and approve. All right, and then our action items for this evening includes the CLG grant discussion. That's actually the primary action item. And I see that Tanya and the planning team has organized some of our comments on what we'd like to see for the next CLG grant cycle. And I know there's also some input from SHPO and then some discussion to ensue. So I was going to turn that over to Tanya for a good summary for us.
Thanks, Chair. For the record, Tanya Saltzman, Senior Planner, Staff Liaison to the HLC. Yeah, so what I did in the memo, I pretty much almost verbatim included what the input was that I received from various commissioners about CLG grant ideas. I also received an email from Commissioner Christopher that I can read because she knew she wasn't able to come here. I can share that in a little bit. Basically, the goal of this meeting is to sort of discuss these ideas that have been presented, try to narrow them down a little bit, maybe get a sense of priorities. You know, we really want to do this, like this might be a nice to have, that type of thing, fairly informal. Get a sense. I'd like to hear from those people who did submit ideas if they just want to talk through each of their things very briefly, just to so I don't put words in your mouth, just describe kind of what you're thinking, what you're envisioning. For me, as the person who puts the grant together, what's really important is it's one thing to have an idea of just, you know, things we should do, but what I need to know, and, you know, this is a work in progress, of course, is what does that actually mean as a grant task? You know, what are we saying? Hey, SHPO, we are doing this, this is our deliverable, or this is our, you know, sometimes it's time, but it needs to be very kind of tangible and specific. You know, if we say, you know, improve, blah, 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 like we need to make that a little bit more specific, and we can work through that together, but that's kind of the eye that I'm looking for. As a reminder, the applications are going to be due at the end of February. So I do that and submit it to SHPO. Before we do submit that, we do have to get approval from the Board of County Commissioners. So I'm kind of working backwards on this timeline, but The idea is that at our next meeting, the first Monday of February, we'll finalize a list. I'll be working on sort of the numbers and the balance between in-kind match and reimbursable stuff. So I'll be doing that in this period, and then after that, after we finalize it, I'll do all that background work. Then I'll get it blessed by the Board of County Commissioners, and then we apply. Many of you have been through this before, some of you haven't. There is some flexibility in our applications. So for instance, say we want, $5,000 for training and we don't actually get to it, there are opportunities for me to adjust the scope with SHPO. So, we don't want to go into it planning on being super loosey-goosey, but they're very kind to us in how we can kind of finesse things as we go along, as the situation kind of evolves or changes. So that's my goal, to just hone in on kind of a more manageable list that I will then play with on my side of things in the interim before the next meeting. So what I wouldn't mind is hearing from each of the commissioners, I guess in the order that I put it in the memo. Just talk a little bit about your ideas, and if we want to discuss at that time, we can do that. We can keep it's a small group, obviously.
Mhm.
We can keep it fairly informal. So
Mhm.
yeah. And then just as a reminder, and again, we're not necessarily putting dollars on it right now, but we can request up to 15,000, I believe it was. Is that what I said?
16.
That was 16.
Oh, 16. Okay. Sorry. It's been a little while since I made this.
Yeah.
This memo, and it differs, they, depending on how many people or how many CLGs apply, sometimes they say, okay, actually you're only getting 11,000, and they adjust accordingly. So, but that's just a kind of a ballpark. So yeah, with that, can we start with Chair Stemming?
Certainly.
Since you were first
Yep.
on the list, let's talk about your tasks. Thank you.
Sounds good. I had 3 primary ones. Obviously there's more, and it's all, a lot of the things that we've allocated money to in the past is still, I think, very, very viable as well. But the ones that came to mind first and foremost had to do with the commissioner training. I think that's definitely something that even before this newer group that we had, I don't feel like we were all that great about. Not necessarily that there wasn't training available. It's just a lot of it was during the pandemic, which made things more difficult. Yeah, I think I know that there are some good opportunities for training, whether it's more broad, kind of big picture approaches or, more streamlined topics, just depending on what we're interested in. So, and I think SHPO has a little bit of a summary on some of the options too that I noticed. So, I know on our last meeting, we also talked about the different types of training, that there's quite a few that could be in person if it's Oregon specific. There's events that are, a yearly occurrence. So I think every other year they offer it either virtual versus in person. I can't remember what cycle we're on for 2025, but so I feel like those they really are good events, the ones that we've had in the past. And I think particularly the new commissioners would really benefit from having some funds available for those and travel reimbursement or whatever. Preservation Month, obviously something, again, that I feel, thanks to the last few years, kind of went by the wayside a little bit. And I do feel like the core group of volunteers that have contributed in the past are kind of ramping things back up. So I do feel like there's going to be some better momentum building particularly for this upcoming year. However, with some of the notes I mentioned, I don't really feel like there's a lot of funding necessary, just because of the fact that it is, and always has been, a volunteer effort. We're not being paid for our time and stuff, but, we do things like printing costs, or, there's something in there about like food and snacks and things like that when we did our kickoff events, usually at the beginning part of May. I don't know, I can't remember. There's some provisions in place having to do with who can cover food or whatever. I don't remember what that all entails. It's been a while. So, but yeah, and a lot of times the other commissions, City Redmond, City of Bend, they also contribute some dollar amounts as well. So, but a little bit should be probably towards that. And then the other one is kind of vague that I had, which, and this is strictly based on a lot of the more recent topics that we've had on archaeological sites, and some of the potential studies that we've been talking about, and Goal 5, and I know that some of the other commissioners are mentioning that in theirs as well. So those were basically my top 3. So.
Could you repeat the second and third? I got those kind of mixed up with
Sure.
the,
My first was for commissioner training
right?
opportunities, and then the second being Preservation Month
Oh, preservation.
contribution
Okay. And then the third,
is some sort of funds for either survey or education outreach for learning about archaeological sites.
archaeological. Okay.
Mhm.
Okay.
As a note, Rachel, I believe that we got a response from Curry Gill. Is that correct, Tanya?
Mm.
Regarding what kind of training sessions are even available in 2025? And these funds would need to be used by what date?
They need to be used by the summer of 26.
Okay.
So yeah, I put in a few of the main conferences and a general sense of costs based on what Curry had told us. That's in the memo, and most of those seem to be in the spring of 26. I think it was 2 or 3 different events, so that would be eligible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have another question. Are the funds able to be matched, or is there a provision for private sector funds to be donated to a pool that would maybe supplement and make this grant amount larger than the whatever it is we get allocated?
That's a good question. That's something we've never gone down that road, to my knowledge.
Let's just say Oregon Community Foundation, if some individual or group of individuals wanted to match 50-50 or whatever, could the money go into some place where it could be, I guess, clearly identified that money could be used and spent? Would you be able to find that out if you don't know?
Find that out. It's
Yeah.
possible. Yeah, I'll reach out to the state. It's possible that might function as the match side that we're required to do already. So instead of, we have to do a 1-to-1 match already, and that match is usually provided by in-kind staff time. So it's usually me. I track my hours, and we're not getting a check for it. It's just sort of the county donation.
Mhm.
But if we received, say, a check from a fund, it might have to go into that match side, rather than a third kind of bucket.
Yeah.
I can look into that. I don't know if either of the commissioners up here have any thoughts on that.
But typically, my understanding with, particularly with private foundations, is that there's a lot of paperwork and application process that goes into that for matching funds. OCF was one of them. It was like Meyer Memorial Trust, and there are a handful of others that I usually recognize. But those processes are usually pretty time intensive, is my understanding. And I don't know how they work based on, our quasi, from a county standpoint, as a public entity. I don't know how they do awards like that, or if
Eli,
it's
were you
even
talking
eligible.
were you talking about private sector donations from individuals, corporations, or nonprofits and foundations?
Probably more likely individuals.
Yeah, I
that-
think
that-
that's probably an easier reach, I think.
Yeah.
That,
given the time.
that's more achievable
Hmm.
because otherwise you have to apply separately for basically grants from foundations and 501s
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
even some corporations.
Yeah. OCF has donor advised funds. So
Right.
that's an easier mark as well.
Right.
But it might also depend on the project that we select and
Mhm.
whether that's of interest to any donors too.
Mhm.
So I was just curious. I thought that might be a way to boost our impact if we were able to cast a broader net to get some additional funds.
Mhm.
I can definitely reach out to SHPO and see what their thoughts are on that.
That'd be great. Thanks.
With that, we'll go to the next bunch of ideas, which is Commissioner Ashley.
Okay. I don't have the memo in front of me, but I recall the first one had to do with I believe the Warm Springs reservation, or was that the third one?
First one was improve the county's historic property database, so it is up
Yeah.
to date
Mhm.
regarding
Yeah, and I
owners.
gathered from the last meeting we had that perhaps there's some gaps in that, and maybe that's more of a staff function.
Mhm.
But Commissioner Cyphers and I think we were looking at the fire issue when we realized that maybe we don't know as much about some of the properties, the historic properties, as we would like to know if they're at risk or who the owners are, or really much about the state of condition that they might be in. So that was sort of the basis of my listing that. Again, I don't know if that's maybe a waste of grant money, and maybe that's something staff can get to at some point in time rather than, utilize funding for something that might not be as important as training or something. So,
If I may, yeah, I made a note in the memo that, so all of that information is maintained by the assessor's office. It's based on the tax rolls. We can't really play with them. However, we could do, and we have in the past, a mailing to say, hey, are you interested in providing us additional information or that type of thing? They have to kind of opt in, and it's been a little tricky historically, but in terms of, or maybe they have a preferred contact person that they don't have on their official tax roll or things like that. I think there's little things we could certainly do for fairly low cost, the cost of a mailing, which is, probably $100 or something. Depends how
Yeah.
much postage is up this year.
Mhm.
I think that would be the first step. There's only so much we can do in terms of, building condition and things like that. That's all kind of in the assessor's wheelhouse, unless someone decided to become an active participant and saying, hey, would you like to come to my property? You'd have to have consent, which is a possibility certainly, but not a guarantee. So yeah, it's a little tricky, but I think there's things we can do towards that goal.
Yeah. If the rest of the commission feels that that's even important, I mean, I guess we can get to that later. Okay, so then the second one must have been the fire.
The second was develop a more impactful historic preservation month, i.e. hire
sorry.
a part-time consultant to
Okay.
coordinate all of the cities and organizations into a comprehensive program promotion plan.
Okay, so that's the same
yeah.
as Rachel's number 2. Yeah,
Mhm.
essentially.
And then the tribes.
And the tribes, yeah.
Mhm.
And I think what I had in mind with the tribes was, again, what we had discussed earlier in one of my first commission meetings, and that was that there are probably plenty of sites, and maybe this ties back to number 3 for Rachel's comment about archaeological sites, but maybe that could be tied in with working with the Confederated Tribes to identify Native heritage sites that might be unknown to us or that might be more important than we think. I don't know, but that was something that seemed to be on our wish list earlier last year, that we thought that there might be hope that there would be some dialogue between the county and Confederated Tribes. So, so it's a little amorphous at this point, but the idea was to get us working with them somehow.
Do you envision, I'm just thinking out loud here, do you envision that as being commissioners doing that outreach or staff or unclear at this moment?
Professionals, staff. But I think maybe both, actually. It would be good to have maybe volunteers along with staff, so there maybe that might present a more friendly front, I guess, or approach than just government to government. I don't know. It was just I'm not. Mark Hudson might have a better sense of that because he's worked with multiple different entities, and I think he's worked with tribes also. So maybe we could query him a little bit about what might be a reasonable first step, really just a first step to open
Right.
discussions.
I do believe that in general, and Will, you might have some insight in this, I'm not sure, not to put you on the spot, but I think in general, even separate from the Goal 5 kind of rulemaking stuff, our community development department has been working on kind of improving and making those connections with the tribes in terms of notice and things. I don't know where that's at. So there has been some dialogue. And I would anticipate that some of that would increase / improve / narrow down as those Goal 5 rulemaking things come into place. So I think it's happening just invisibly right now. So maybe this is something that we could, because it is, as you noted, Commissioner Ashley, a little amorphous now, we could potentially identify some staff time kind of match that would, maybe we could apply, as we have a better idea of how the rulemaking is shaking out, we could apply that to that type of work. And if it doesn't shake out, we can apply that staff time to something else, maybe.
Yeah.
And it also could include volunteer time as well. So from yourselves,
Yeah.
just thinking out loud.
Right. And I could see that needing some staff time just because it's not like it would be anything that necessarily that you had earmarked for the next year and a half to actually put dedicated time to. So I could see that at a minimum having some CLG funding in there for that, knowing that it's going to take a while to get that dialogue and going with the tribes.
My understanding, and this sort of ties into the Goal 5 rulemaking, that all of those rules are, the effective date is January 1st, 2026, because they want to use this year to do coordination with the Legislative Commission on Indian Services. So that's to work with the tribes and local governments to figure out kind of what they want to elevate to coordinate on. So kind of cast their net and determine that. So I feel like once that's underway, we'll have a better sense of what kind of dialogue we might want to have on the local level. I don't know. Just my thought.
Well, and something else we need to consider, what tribes are you talking about?
Right. Exactly.
Right. The south end of the county is traditional use area of the Klamath.
Right.
Whereas the north end is Storm Springs and Burns Paiute. So you may need to include more time.
A
if
little
you're
bit more outreach.
dealing with 3 versus 1 tribe. It's just something to keep in mind.
And I think when this stuff happens with the Legislative Commission, I think they're going to find out which tribes want what information from whom. So hopefully, we'll have 3 tribes saying, "Oh, Deschutes." So we'll already have that kind of, we'll know what tribes that would be in our kind of wheelhouse to reach out to.
Well, and it is our understanding that not necessarily, obviously, their land, the reservations and whatnot aren't all necessarily in Deschutes County, but which other counties are going to have any kind of funding available to actually, get something in the works,
No, this is great.
Yeah.
If I'm reading your staff notes correctly on this, Tanya, it sort of appears that the kind of dialogue that the county is seeking and that the tribes may be seeking would be relative to, less relative to cultural and heritage sites. Because those things are very separated in the tribal
Mhm.
community.
I think the Goal 5 rulemaking is serving as sort of the crossover for that. You know, it's
Okay.
talking about having the dialogue in terms of notice of applications that take place in these sensitive, significant areas. So while our conversations that are happening with the tribes now are kind of a wider net, just kind of countywide, not necessarily historical or archaeological resources, I think there is an overlap, but I could be wrong. I think any inroads that we can make and collaboration we can do is great.
Mhm.
That doesn't really answer your question, does it?
It is, I think it is worth more discussion though, and, maybe the, other commissioner can, Eli,
Sure.
what's his name?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, the other commissioner who works with the
Oh,
tribe.
Mark Hudson.
Mark, yeah.
I wish Mark was here.
I wish so too, because I know
Yeah.
he's been involved he has in fact been involved in the cultural overlap, I think, especially with regard to heritage sites. Had an interesting experience in the Warm Springs. I was out on a photo expedition and stumbled into an area I probably should have had a permit to go or permission to go, but was approached by a tribal elder. And he wanted me to know that I was encroaching on a heritage site.
Oh.
We had a we had a very nice conversation, and he revealed some very, very interesting facts about this cultural site or heritage site, and then asked me not to share it publicly. So
Interesting.
Yeah.
I know there's a real separation from the tribal point of view about land planning and land use issues and, all the governmental communications back and forth and what they consider their cultural or heritage sites.
Mhm.
Well, often those sites do not have anything on the ground you would recognize as such.
And,
We
and
call
they don't, and they
additional
don't want it.
properties
Yeah.
and federal law.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
tribes are not very forthcoming in that information, and we totally understand that. So you may not get as far as we want to in
Yeah.
regards to extracting that kind of information. They'll just say, don't go in this area, but they won't say why or what's there. So,
So you wouldn't, yeah, like in Dennis's case, you wouldn't have necessarily known you were encroaching on that because you have no
Right.
way to be aware of
Right.
boundaries or,
nothing.
yeah,
would
no
click
landmarks,
with
yeah,
that Unless you had that insider's knowledge, but
exactly.
And that's what's interesting about the Goal 5 rulemaking about kind of cultural landscapes. It's kind of on the tribes or whoever it's significant to say, to elevate it, to say, to choose to elevate it or not, to nominate it. It's
Yeah.
almost not our place. It's kind of there. It has to come
Mhm.
from
Yeah.
them.
right.
We can provide them with the tools to say, hey, this is a program that exists and this is a thing, and we're here to help through it, but only they
Mhm.
can decide to initiate
Right.
that.
And it's understandable the hesitation or concern because they don't want it to be out there in public either, because that helps protect it in a way, but yeah, it's catch-22. Yeah.
Well, maybe for the purpose, I mean, this is a very large discussion. I realize,
Mhm.
purposes of the grant, we could certainly allocate just some time for figuring this out and talking about it and start from there. I think that's what we can.
Yeah, it might be the first step.
Yeah.
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 So
Thank
those are
you.
my 3 contributions.
Those are great. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Next is Commissioner Hoarding Jones.
Well, I am paralleling Rachel's comments here and continued training for not only the commissioners, but the planning staff. you have turnover fairly often too, and
Mhm.
everyone needs to be up to speed. So I've always been supportive of that, as well as continuing funding and support for Historic Preservation Week. And need to consider in October is also Archaeology Month.
Right.
We've never acknowledged it. There's not been a lot of effort gone towards it in the last few years, probably because of the pandemic. But when I first started here and moved to Bend, it was quite an effort. And we had big posters that
Mhm.
SHPO would prepare and disseminate throughout the state. So, a whole list of programs. So I think maybe we need to keep our eye on and see if that
Yeah.
effort regenerates.
Um,
Haven't heard anything yet.
but the Deschutes Historic Museum does the Archaeology Roadshow, but I
Mhm.
think they schedule that yeah, it's in the summertime.
Yeah, it's tied into historic preservation.
Right, yeah, that's right. Yep. So,
And I've also thought we need to continue work on the storyboard. So since we acknowledge National Register listed properties, I thought, why not include them? And I just did a
Mm.
quick search, and I think there were 8, which is not an onerous amount of effort to include them.
yeah.
It just keeps our storyboard fresh.
Yeah, and I reached out to our IT staff. I have not yet received an answer or had discussion, but to see kind of what's involved and how, because that's mostly beyond me, technology wise, but that would be a kind of a staff task that I think could definitely be done in whatever scale they feel appropriate, whether it's just updating those 8 sites or sort of refreshing it a little bit more. I think that's a great idea. Apparently that was one of the first usage of story map technology when that first came out. It's
Right.
quite old. And so when we had them fix something a year ago, it's very fragile. So
Oh, no.
apparently, and again, this is me coming from a non-technology background, but it's created in some very strange way. And so it might involve a
probably-
little bit of interesting work. They might enjoy that. But yeah,
Mm.
but I think
Yeah,
that's
it
something
just
that
need
would be
to
a great,
updated with the most recent.
sorry.
It just need to be updated with the
Exactly.
most recent.
Exactly. And we have those
software.
materials, so
Yeah.
it's not, that would not be a heavy lift. It's a great idea.
Mm.
And I've also kind of been an advocate for years of putting something out on the web for the public, someone who's interested in considering nominating a property, or at least finding out how you go about doing it. And this was kind of brought home over the holidays. I have a friend that lives near Smith Rock who was asking how they could nominate their house. And, just because it's old doesn't mean it's worthy of being listed on any list. But I didn't even have any information I could send her to. Go look it up here. And most people, including myself, if you tell me to look up in the county code, I am not going to do it.
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
So it doesn't need to be in depth, but at least provide some information and then lead them if they're interested in more information.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And it's fairly simple for us to create a web page that's, it wouldn't be anything particularly fancy or flashy, but just, a little
Right.
FAQ, a little
Yeah, Q&A on.
Q&A kind
yeah.
of thing. And that's,
Yep.
And there's plenty of that information out there that we could steal from other websites.
yeah, and also link to our code because, every process is specific, but yeah, the code is very, as I think I mentioned in an email to you, the code is dense and, we're
Mhm.
used to reading it, but the average
Right.
person is not, and it doesn't make it easy. I think that's a great
Mhm.
idea that we could.
Even if there's a go-to number, direct, probably be your line, the one that gets answered. It's sometimes that's the best way for them to start. And obviously, if it goes with a website search that takes them to Deschutes County, the planning pages and historic preservation, and yeah, as long as I think we can navigate to that point and then have a couple contact phone numbers and emails in there. And then of course, yeah, we could do like an about, Q&A page. And it's like, what does it take to have
Yeah, what are,
resource nominated?
yeah,
Yeah,
what are the
yeah.
criteria, right?
What does
Mhm.
make something historic or, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
that'd be fun.
Mhm.
And again, terribly difficult to do. I think between,
Mhm.
I'll probably come up with some copy.
Right,
It's all in
right.
one meeting.
Mhm. Yeah. And I think the link for the story map is already on there. It does. Yes. Okay. I know it takes a little bit of navigating to get to it in the first place. So,
Yeah, you have to
Yeah.
go to the community development website and then there's
Mhm.
drop downs to get to the HLC.
right.
That probably won't change in the future.
Right.
because There is a hierarchy
Mhm.
it's accessed, but yeah, and you know, if we did that, we could also promote that on social media or you know, just really amplify everything. So I think that's a really good example of just a good use of kind of
Well, you know, I just remember COID, Central Oregon Irrigation. I get all their texts and everything from them since I'm a water patron. And they do, for a while, it was once a week, they'd send a historic photo from their archive. And they're really cool. Everybody likes old pictures, right? And they're promoting their history without really putting any effort other than scanning a picture.
Mhm.
So, you know, you consider doing something like that too.
Yeah.
If you have a Facebook account or whatever.
Or even the newsletter for that matter. And then that way it's, you know, it's a once a month thing or, yeah. I mean, the city of Bend used to do that with some of their water bills. They'd sneak in a historic photo or something. And it's just, you know, it's just the little newsletter thing. It's just one little image and you can,
the county has a newsletter and I believe
yeah.
I think community development does, but that's more about kind of permitty stuff. But I bet
Uh-huh.
there's
Yeah.
a way we could, you know, insert either an article or a historic photo or whatever we want. I mean, I
Yeah.
think maybe being a little more aggressive about kind of inserting HLC related stuff in
Mhm.
county media.
Well, just
Mhm.
historic, I mean, I know I've done lots of interpretive stuff and everyone is drawn to old photos.
Really are.
So that'll catch your eye, whereas something else won't.
Mhm.
I think that's great.
As exciting as planning
question
is, I'm
about it.
sure. Yeah, watching Tanya in action at her desk.
I have a question about those updates to the storyboard and goal 5 resources and so forth. Um, would the grant funds need to be available to do those tasks, or can those tasks just be done at the request of the commission to the
That's a good-
county?
Regardless, it is staff time, so it's basically myself or in certain cases, our IT people who can do the actual magic. You know, we have to gauge our capacity, and when we have grant funds that, even if it's just in kind, it kind of allocates it earmarks some of my time, more formally than just adding it to the work plan. It can be added to our work plan, and again, we'll, if I'm stepping on any toes, let me know. But, anything can be added to our general kind of planning and community development work plan. But if there's actually support of a grant, even if it's not an actual check, it's more likely to be done.
Okay.
Did I say that right? Yeah. It's the,
American Heritage, yeah.
Mhm.
Before we get too much further, I'd like to make a comment back to Eli's. I think it's his second note about impactful historic preservation month and maybe involving professionals. And your comment, or staff's comment, indicating that there might be some interest in the visitor bureau. And I think Visit Bend would definitely be interested in having some role in that month. And I know Explore Sisters, which is newly focused on tourism, and Sisters would very much like to take on that task. So,
Yeah,
Uh,
Dennis, it's probably been a while since any of the volunteer group for Preservation Month has actually reached out to the Visit Bend group.
Yeah.
Because typically when we have interacted with them, it's been just to see if they wanted to contribute a tour date, like they'll do their walking historic tours of downtown Bend, and that's been kind of their contribution for the month. But it's been a while, I think, since we had a whole lot of outreach with that group.
they have widened their focus, so
But
I'm sure they would be interested in covering that month in their promotions. And I know Explore Sisters definitely would.
Okay, just moving on through the memo on additional grant things. So I made some notes on training opportunities based on what Curry Gill from SHPO had suggested to us at our previous meeting. These are, a lot of stuff is not available yet, information for 2026, not surprisingly, but this gave a just general sense of sort of costs and what's out there. These are the things that Curry mentioned. It seems like training is really important. I mean, it is important, but you all have mentioned it as a significant thing. One thought is to really focus on training, and that would be the actual kind of reimbursable, payable part of the grant. And then these other things that we're talking about become the in-kind staff match. I don't know. So we have these three opportunities for trainings. And of course there are more. There's individual kind of one-off things, but these are kind of the biggies.
Yeah.
The thing that stood out to me was Oregon Heritage, which is probably also a little bit more logistically easy because it's in Oregon. Curry had mentioned this is a great conference. I don't know if any of you have thoughts about any of these. It's possible we could send, a few commissioners and maybe staff to this if we wanted to do that, because it would be covered. It is eligible. So I'd like to get people's thoughts on that.
I think it's a fantastic, I've been to 2 of them.
Oh, have you?
And they're really well worth, in fact, Ben was a host one year.
Yeah.
Mhm.
They're really worth the time. And I think they, in the past, have offered scholarships to help defray the cost of someone to go to the conference. So if that is the case still, you could tag that on to reducing maybe the cost out of our pocket.
Do you know what that criteria was? Or
I can't remember it all. I kind of would look at it, but my agency paid for me to go, so I wasn't going to tap into the money that could have been used elsewhere,
And this is what, I mean, as Curry mentioned, like this is what this type of grant money is for. I mean, part of it. So, that's kind of the direction we wanted to go and go just full on training. That's an eligible cost and a cost
Mhm.
that they would approve. I'm curious, just of the people who are here, how many of you would theoretically, assuming logistics worked out, be interested in going to a conference, assuming it was paid for?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And if we could,
I would.
it's an in-person one too, is arranging transportation or so we can carpool for best efficiency. That was always my limiter on a lot of these, was like what part of the state was it in, how many hours of driving was ahead. So,
So I see interest from Commissioner Ashley. I saw a nod.
mhm.
Commissioner Schmidling or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would love to go.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that could be something that we could do.
And I think the 2025 version for the Oregon Heritage, that it's virtual this year, is
Right.
my
Yeah, I
understanding.
didn't see anything.
That's probably, there should be information on their website about that already.
Okay, so as of right now, I'll just kind of bookmark that as a chunk of change that we could kind of look into for
Mhm.
a lot of, I mean, whatever we feel is appropriate in terms of commissioners going. That would be fun and educational.
Mhm.
Great. Any other thoughts on training and conferences before we move on? No? Okay.
Yeah.
Now to the City of Sisters, we have Emmy Shoup here in person. Thanks for joining us. Sisters, as we know, has provided a lot of input in the CLG grants. They've done some great projects. For the last 2 cycles at least, have been really the bulk of the kind of reimbursable projects, hiring consultants and that type of stuff, and it's been great. So Emmy has a bunch of suggestions here, and I'd love to hear about them.
Thanks for having me. For the record, my name's Emmy Shoup. I'm the associate planner with the City of Sisters. So, as you saw, I've put together a short list of ideas, and since then I've run them by Curry Gill with SHPO, and she gave me some feedback, which was very helpful. some of these items, like the intensive level survey of, pursuing local designation of like Hotel Sisters, Sisters Library, as well as considering more long-term survey projects. Curry sounded supportive of it, but maybe we need to do, she recommended that we meet with the National Register Coordinator to see if our current RLS was robust enough to justify pursuing an intensive level survey. Because if it's not, then we may have to kind of do it over, do some additional work. But the items that are a bit more bite-sized, like updating our story map, updating the historic resources, walking tour brochure, those things I think were eligible for the funding, and those are pretty small asks. I'd say those two together could be $2,000 to $3,000 total. It might be less, because the story map would probably cost the most, but it's just a matter of updating it, because it's been 2 or 3 years at this point.
Would that be like a consultant services for that?
It would be a consultant services. We'd work with our GIS consultant. Then for the Historic Preservation Month activities, I don't think we'd be shooting for May 2025, but maybe May 2026, we would get more involved with that kind of event planning. And after hearing back from Curry, I was thinking about maybe we need to do like a 5-year strategic plan. And that's not necessarily something that requires funds. It would be more so staff time, taking the time to maybe conduct some community surveys to get assess community sentiments, get some priorities on different projects, do some more direct outreach with property owners of those buildings that could be eligible for local designation, and see what kind of resources would make them consider designation, or if that's something that's not even they want to consider. So that's something I was talking about with my director today, to see maybe we do a strategic plan, do the groundwork now, and that way for upcoming grant cycles, we're kind of primed with, what the budget might have to be, what the staff time might be, and what those project steps are to move forward over the next 5 years. So there are some small CLG grant funds that we could be asking for, but a lot of that could just be staff time, putting together that strategic plan. And again, just to touch on this Western design theme, updating the development code, because we're not designated with a historic district yet, it could be eligible for that, but because it's not in place, making improvements to that Western design theme code isn't eligible for grant funds. Any questions?
I guess my question as a fellow staff member, if you were, let's say, I think the strategic plan is a great idea, and it does, lay out, like you said, the tasks and the kind of scope for the years to come. Is there capacity in Sisters? I mean, I don't want to tell you guys to do something if there is not an unfunded mandate. Is that something that
a great question. And I put together a work plan just to make sure, could this be feasible? I think it could. There's a way that I could pace it out, because it would be me doing the work. Knowing that we have a full grant cycle this time. The last project, we kind of had half the time because we had stuff going on. So I think I could make it work. But yeah, we are a small team, and it's just me, and we are busy doing other planning efforts in Sisters. So if it wasn't necessary to have on the docket, no hard feelings.
Okay, no, that's helpful. We can always, with staff time, obviously, a lot of what I do, some of it ends up being tracked in the grant, and some of it just kind of gets absorbed into my job, because that's it's just too much for the grant itself. So I think you'd probably be in a similar boat, but
yes, there would be quite a few hours, like 60 hours to put that together, but over the span of 18 months.
How much work do you feel the Western design theme needs? Is it just more refinement or like a total overhaul of what's in the code right?
It might be a overhaul, just because there's some clear and objective standards that we should integrate. And then kind of creating two paths with this design theme where there's clear and objective criteria, and then there's subjective where someone wants to make a more interpretive design proposal, then they can choose that path that's
Mhm.
more conditional use oriented, as well as integrating the building hardening guidelines. I think that'd be nice to integrate.
Yeah.
But it seems to go out of the scope of the historic preservation at this point.
Yeah. And the RLS recommendations, those are now 6 years old. That's hard to believe.
Right, yeah,
Time flies. Wow.
going on 7.
And if I recall that RLS, I mean, it was the one I'm thinking of. It covered a lot.
It might be robust enough. It is
Yeah,
quite.
But I mean, it felt like it covered a lot of properties but the ability to hone in on those that were truly eligible wasn't maybe quite as refined as it could be. I'm trying to think back to some of the content that was on there, but.
Yeah, that sounds accurate. So it just might be a matter of taking the time to schedule a meeting with that National Register coordinator, and they might be able to say that it's enough or direct us otherwise. But that conversation and kind of looking further could be integrated into that strategic plan process.
And I'll put you on the spot a little bit. Are there any projects of what you mentioned, which is quite a bunch and it really runs the gamut, which is great. Like, is there something that you really do want to do? Or like, is there a high priority project for the City of Sisters that just seems, if you had your druthers, what you would want to do?
If there's I'm going to call it a low hanging fruit where it's a high reward and low effort, I would say updating the walking tour brochure. That's something that the Historical Society really enjoys, and they're really great about distributing it. I get an email from them probably twice a year saying, hey, we're ready for the next box of 500 brochures, which is really exciting. And, they'll occasionally email me and say, oh, this building name changed, or we need to update the map. And so I've been kind of tracking that and putting it on the back burner. So I'd say that's a great one for us to take on and use funds to print those brochures, because that's what we've done in I think 2021.
That definitely gets the most coverage to the public by far. I think probably between that and what the Three Sisters Historical Society contributes with their efforts. Those are like the two public awareness strategies, I guess.
Yeah, they're awesome. And, I didn't get the opportunity or take the opportunity to reach out to them and see if there's anything specifics that they might be needing. So that is something I could look into over the next couple of weeks, and follow up with Tanya, see if they have any asks. If we were to do just that one project, I think updating the brochure and making the prints would be like $1,500. And then maybe it could only be another couple hundred for any other resources that they may need.
I remember in the past we bought audio equipment.
Yeah. So maybe they need some new equipment. Who knows?
I mean, those are things that seem very not glamorous, but it really does help the organizations,
Yeah.
These are great. Thank you so much for providing these and for being such a good partner.
Thank you.
Thoughts or questions? Great. Thanks, everyone. There's a lot to work with here, I think. I'm just going to open it up to discussion. Any feelings? Positive, negative, things you just can't live without, or just, I'm hearing training. I'm hearing preservation month, whatever that might take. It might not be a lot of money, but we don't have to say exactly what the fund will be for yet. I'm hearing a lot of things from Sisters, maybe finessing some of that. What else are we hearing?
I'm hearing a lot, sort of a package of visibility, whether it's the
Mhm.
story map or the brochure or the preservation month or the archaeology month. I'm sort of seeing sort of a package of public relations promotion. Maybe there's a combination of different things we can do there that is kind of fit together, as well as working with City of Redmond and the historical museum and so forth. So that's what I see.
Yeah.
And then the second thing I see, I guess, is maybe sort of future projects to start to lay the groundwork for, whether it's Confederated Tribes or Klamath Tribe, or things that kind of a couple of years down the road, that we could maybe show a little bit of progress between now and then, but maybe hit our stride 2 or 3 years from now on some of those.
Yeah, I agree on that. I think allocating some time for those conversations now will be helpful to, yeah, like you said, plan ahead for the future. And especially once the rules are in place, things will be a little more finite and of tasks. But I think, yeah, feel like we might be able to get a good balance of tasks here, of reimbursables and staff time.
Yeah, it does feel like there would be a fair amount of staff time sprinkled in, just as additional support for, with obviously with us focusing a bit more on the, public outreach part of things, but yeah, making sure that there's enough extra monetary support that's necessary for some of the other behind the scenes type work. Yeah.
So just looking at my list, I would feel comfortable kind of turning this around on my end and marinating on it and slicing and dicing and coming up with a little
Summary.
the summary for
Yeah.
the next meeting and trying to kind of separate things out and just throw some dollar figures at that and coming back to you based on this conversation. And of course, if I go the wrong direction, I want you to tell me and say, you forgot this, or I really want to do this. We can do that. We have the time to do that at this point, but
Even during our February meeting, do you think?
yeah, I mean, we want it to be, by the time we walk out of the February meeting, it should be 99% done, but
Okay.
give or take,
Yeah.
little fussing that I'll do with it regardless, just to make the math work, which is frankly the hardest part. But yeah, I think I feel comfortable with the way this conversation has gone. Is there any other thoughts or advocates for any other things that I've overlooking or?
Would you be trying to put monetary amounts as part of this initial summary?
Yeah,
I think
mean,
we'd probably need to just to,
we'll take a guess on sort of the training, that's the
Yeah.
most kind of concrete thing, and probably round up a little bit, just based on, I don't know if it's appropriate or acceptable to send everybody. I mean, there is.
well, not everybody usually can go either.
Right,
so,
right. I mean,
yeah.
it seems like there's funding for that. It's not an expensive, conference. It's not like we're going to Vegas.
No.
We could
We
find,
could.
but this seems pretty affordable. And I think
Mhm.
from what Commissioner Horting Jones and Curry has said, the Heritage Conference is excellent.
Yeah.
So, and we can always play with that, but maybe I'll start with that and just kind of put that down and pencil it out and see where it goes.
Yeah.
And Emmy, I might follow up with you about other priorities and just how we want to slice and dice things. Great. Okay.
So Tanya, would you be following up with us via email? The
It would just
commission,
be
or
the next meeting.
Okay, all right. So nothing in between, you
Nothing
don't
in
think?
between, because
Okay.
there's not frankly that much time there.
There's
Considering that I need to
not.
get the packet out a week before. So that meeting is
That's true.
February 3rd is our next meeting. So I would just put that together as a piece of the regular memo.
Okay.
And we would discuss it at that time. And again, there is always flexibility. Once we apply for the grant, if things have to switch around a little, they're pretty cool with that.
'Cause your application deadline is the 28th, so the end of February, and then you
Yeah,
have
we have to
time
go
to
to the board
refine
and
it.
do that, so
Oh,
Usually that's a pretty simple thing, but it just is a schedule matter, just
Got it.
saying that.
Okay.
But yeah, of course, if there's kind of last minute information, we can always get that together.
Mhm.
How does everyone feel about that?
Yeah,
Mhm. Good. I'm good with it.
yep.
Great.
Yeah. A lot of good ideas. It does feel like we'll be sprinkling in, like there'll be a couple of larger projects, but then I feel like we can disperse amongst a lot of the other smaller ones so that we're not like completely sidelining one thing in preference over another. Yeah, I like that.
Excellent. Well, I really appreciate this discussion and everyone's feedback. I know it's always a little nebulous to try to squish all these ideas into something very tangible. So yeah, this is great. I will plan to come back at that next meeting with those items.
Great.
And in the interim, if anyone has thoughts, shoot me an email. If you forgot about something, you have a bright idea at 3 a.m, happy to read that email the next morning. Um, or not so bright idea. We like all ideas. Yeah. So
Excellent.
thank you.
Thank you, Tanya. Yeah. And thank you, Emmy.
Thank you.
All right. Our next item is if there's any additional staff or commissioner comments.
I'll just say from a staff comment, I mean, I've been talking a lot, but so our next meeting is February 3rd, and so CLG stuff will be one of the agenda items. We'll probably also circle back on the Goal 5 rulemaking, the finalized stuff that's happened, just a quick update. Not quite sure what else will be on that agenda, but you can look to those two things to be there.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, this meeting has reminded me that it's our core group of Preservation Month planners have not discussed anything. I have not seen any emails come through, so I might be sending out probably just a sort of a little nag email, I'll start with Kelly Cannon Miller at the museum and see what she's heard, and we'll go from there. But usually we'll do sort of a little meet and greet intro type, brainstorming session, and then usually it just kind of grows organically from there, at least typically. So.
Oh, and I'll also note, sorry, it just came to me that we'll return to our subcommittee reports. I'll send a reminder, but if anyone has things to talk about concerning those at the next meeting, we'll do that. And again, not every subcommittee needs to have something at every meeting, but just a reminder that we'll do that.
Okay.
And yeah, that's all I have.
All right. Is there any other commissioner comments? All right. Well, I think with that, we're ready to adjourn our special meeting for January. So thank you for your time tonight. And we'll see you all in February. Thank you.
Sounds good. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.